Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors. To thank our TALMUD TORAH sponsors for the month of Tammuz. Rabbi Naftali Tilson from Eretz Yisrael for dedicating all of the shirim and drashos this month in commemoration of the yahrzeit of his parents, Rabbi Yona ben Avraham Leyb, Rivka bas Ya'akov, and in the merit of the entire shir, may be Zochem Eretz Hashem to continue to swim through the Amshel Talmud together, and the merit of neshama and aliyah and the families in Nechama. Thank our week of learning sponsors, Tova NessAiver, in dedication of the shir and all of the Torah Baruch Hashem that we are zocha to learn together. To thank Jacob and Julie Blumenfeld for dedicating the week of learning as well. L'ilui nishmas, Jacob's grandmother, Henna bas Mordechai zichron lebracha, and their Daf Yomi sponsors for today, Ms. Judy Werner, in creation of the yahrzeit of her mother, Rachel bas Dovid Mordechai zichron lebracha. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the neshamas will have an aliyah and the families in Nechama. So we also dedicate our learning in the zuchos of all of the precious soldiers of the IDF. We're aware of following the news of the massive operation happening now in Gittin, an effort to go ahead and rid the world of pure evil and prevent the senseless loss of lives that have taken so many beautiful neshamas over the course of the last few months. We hope, we daven, we learn that our soldiers will be successful in Meretz Hashem in all of their missions, and we zochem Meretz Hashem to come home to their families b'shalom. And lastly, we take the opportunity to wish everyone a happy 4th of July. You know, it is so important that even though, again, I always speak about this, that even though, again, as Jews, Libenu b'mizrach, right, our hearts are in Eretz Yisrael. Halavai will be zocha, one day that our bodies will follow suit, right? And we know that for the Jew there is only one homeland. Yet until that great day when we go home, we are privileged to be citizens of this great country. And on this day, when we celebrate the founding of this country, we have to be makir tov, not just to the founding fathers, and not just to all of those who have literally given of themselves and given of their lives to be able to allow us to have what we have today, but also to be makir tov, to the Ribono Shel Olam. For even though we are in Galus, and it's important that we remind ourselves each and every day that we are in diaspora, but that we are zocha to be in a galus that is so supportive of our ruchnius, that we have the ability to become the best Judaic version of ourselves, that we have the ability to observe, that we have the ability to learn, and that those rights are protected. Again, just follow the latest Supreme Court ruling, and you can see that we live in a land where the law of the land protects our ability to be Torah observant Jews. That is not something we should take for granted, because historically the Jew in diaspora did not have those rights and did not have those entitlements. So it's true, we're not where we need to be yet. But until we get there, we are privileged, Baruch Hashem, to be in a land, to be in a country that allows us to practice, to daven, to learn, to come close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to our heart's desires. And for that, we must have hakaras hatov to the country, to its leadership, to its armed forces, and to the Ribono Shel Olam as well. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should continue to bless this country with the strength, but most importantly with the moral clarity, to be able to be a leader, not just here within our borders, but in Yahrzeit Hashem on the worldwide stage as well. We'll say with that, let us begin. So our daf today is Memtes 49. We are picking up, as Menachem Schoenfeld just reminded me, we only got to the Gemara yesterday. Right? It was so we have to pick up to the Gemara, but in Yahrzeit Hashem it's okay. It's a little bit of actually it's not short. Okay, so we're going to start. We'll say, so remember again, the Mishnah, the new parak introduced us to the concept. It's actually going to be really very interesting. The halachas concerning payments. And the notion that different obligations are paid from different types of property. So for example, again, the Mishnah really gave us 3 categories we're going to focus on. So nizikin, damages. Damages are paid from best property, what we call idis, right? Loans. We'll call it loans. Balchov, loans or financial obligations ultimately paid from Beinonis, middle grade property, and Ksuvas Isha paid from Ziburis, lowest grade property. Now I will say, what I just want to point out is something very important, which is, I know you know this, but I'll say it anyway. When we speak about, for example, paying damages from property, so that presupposes that what? That the damager doesn't have money. In other words, remember, when Reuven damages Shimon, and now Reuven is chayav for damages, So ultimately, again, generally, so if you have cash, you pay in cash. Right? Say you caused $5,000 worth of damages, you pay $5,000 in cash. When we speak about paying in real estate, that presupposes that a person doesn't have any liquid assets. So because he has no cash, we're going to seize property in satisfaction, ultimately, again, of this debt. Good, so let's begin. Says the Gemara, Olam. The Mishnah said, that damages you pay in idis. And the Mishnah said, why do you pay for damages in idis, best property? The Gemara says, Olam, Doraisahu. It's Doraisa that you pay for damages in best property. Dichsiv, Meitav Sadeu Umeitav Karmo Yishalim. Both say it's pretty explicit. The Torah says you pay from the best of your field and the best of your vineyard. So it's a biblical obligation that the damager has to pay with idis. To which the Gemara says, no. Am Rabbi lo tzricha el Rabbi Shmuel. Listen to this. This is neither according to Rabbi Shmuel. The Amar mid'araisa b'denizak shaiminan. Or we'll say, watch this. So now we're going into this. Now this is in accordance with Rabbi Shmuel. I'm just going to read it and we'll get into it. Rabbi Shmuel said that when we speak about paying in accordance with the best property, who's the best property? So Rabbi Shmuel holds b'denizak. Ultimately, we look at the damaged party's best property. Because of tikkun olam, right, for the benefit of society, we pay or we assess with the best of the damager's property. So what are you talking about? Rabbi Shmuel. Here we go. The pasuk says, so just the pasuk itself is talking about the halachas of damages, and says, when Reuven damages Shimon, we pay in accordance with the best of his field and the best of his vineyard. So we'll say, so once again, what is this talking about? Meitav Sedeo Shal Nizak, Umeitav Karmo Shal Nizak, the Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel says it actually refers to the best property of the damaged party. When assessing damages, we gauge damages in accordance with the best of the damaged party's property. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Lo ba'akaso el legabos lenizikim mina idis, the kabbachomer lehektish. Rabbi Akiva says, no, that's not what it means. What it means is that Allah Chalamaisa, when Reuven damages Shimon, so ultimately again we pay bidamazik in accordance with the damager's property. And it's telling us that when you're paying with property, you have to pay of the choicest property. And I both say, now understand, you're thinking to yourself, well, one second, the value is the value, right? In other words, Reuven's damaging Shimon, right? Let's just assume right now, Reuven's caused $5,000 of damage. So we'll say, what is Shimon going to get? $5,000. Now again, in the ideal, what is Shimon getting? Cash. Reuven doesn't have cash. So now we'll say, we're getting into, well, what kind of property do you pay Shimon with? Who cares? $5,000 is $5,000 of property. We'll say, it doesn't matter. Why? Because the halacha always works under the assumption that a person would rather have $5,000 of idis property than $5,000 of Benonis or Ziburis property, which makes sense. Because the better the property, the what? The pashtus, the more liquid it is. Right? The more liquid it is. So that's why, again, that even though, again, the bottom line valuation, you're going to get the same amount, but it's in the damaged party's best interest to receive idis. So I will say, so I just want to point out, what you just saw over here is the fundamental machlokes you're going to reference a number of times between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva, that when assessing damages, right, here's what we agree with, right? Everyone agrees that when you damage someone, if you don't have money to pay with, and you pay with property, the property you pay with is idis, best property. The question I will say is, whose idis are we assessing damages with? Is it the idis of the damager, right, of the mazik, the damager, Reuven, or is it the idis, ultimately, again, of the nizak, the damaged party? So this is totally not clear. It's not clear yet how exactly this works. So let me analyze this. Rabbi Shmuel, Achol Shmeina Mishalim Shmeina. So we'll say, now watch this. Let's take a simple case. Reuven's animal ventures into Shimon's field and consumes a row of produce. So obviously, if it ate we'll call a robust row of produce, right? Shmeina literally means fat. Whereas if it ate like a good row of produce, so obviously you're going to pay back with a good row of produce. Achol kachushim mishalim shmeina. But Rabbi Shmuel, are you saying that if Reuven's ox ate a very lean row of produce, that you would have to pay back with a robust row of produce? Is that what you mean when you say we always pay in accordance with the idis of the nizuk, the best property of the damaged party? That doesn't make any sense. What's the case? Kigon sha'achla aruga bin arugos, v'lo yadinan ikechusha, achal ishmeina achal demishalim leimemetav. No, Rabbi Shmuel means is like this. The Rabbi said, listen to the following case. Reuven's ox ventures into Shimon's field. Shimon has a field, right? And a bunch of rows of produce. Some of the rows are grade A produce. Some of them are grade B. Some of them are grade C. What happened? Reuven's ox ate a row of produce, and what don't we know? We don't know which row he ate. To which Rabbi Shmuel will say, what do you do in that kind of case? What do you do in that kind of case? Reuven has to pay Shimon in accordance with the row of produce. But what kind of row of produce? What kind of row? Idis. Okay. So Rabbi said it doesn't make any sense. So Rabbi says it doesn't make any sense, because let's play this out. Let's say we know that Reuven's ox consumed a row of kechusha. We'll call it ziburis, inferior produce. Reuven would have to pay a row of inferior produce. Hashta de lo yadinan mishalem shmeina. Now that we don't know what Reuven's animal damaged, Reuven has to pay of the best property. Hamotzi mechavera lav haraya. So Rabbi say, why can't Reuven say to Shimon, Shimon, listen, I'll pay you for a row of produce, but I'm paying you for a row of inferior produce. Right? If you could prove that my animal ate more than that, I'm happy to pay you. But Rabbi say, but again, dine, right? So again, dine mamanis 101 is that the burden of proof to extract money rests upon the damaged party. In other words, again, Reuven will agree, I'm going to pay you obviously for a row of produce, but I don't have to pay you for anything more than a ziburis row of produce, unless you could prove otherwise. Ya'kov, we'll say top of Memtes, what's the case? Kigon shahaisa idis denizik kiziburis demazik. So Rabbi said, this is an interesting case. What's the case, Rabbi say? So Reuven damages Shimon. And the case in hand, or the case we're discussing over here, Reuven doesn't have cash on hand to pay. And an interesting case, Rabbi say, where ultimately, again, so Shimon's idis, Shimon's best property, is on the same level as Reuven's most inferior property. Okay, so that's the case over here. Idis the nizak. So ultimately, Reuven, when looking at Reuven's portfolio, Reuven's estate, so Reuven's best property is on the same level as, Shimon's best property. Shimon's the damaged party. Shimon's best property is on the same level as Reuven the damager's least expensive property, Ziburis. Now look at Rashi, Abosai. Rashi says over here, Rashi says, Hachma askinon kigon shahaisa idis tenizak kiziburis tamazik ul Rabbi Shmuel nami ein shamin achilas aruga elafi shemais shahaisa im shmeina im kechusha ula achar shenishuma bebeis din va'amar ein li maos leparo yitol karka b'demei maos nisko. So we'll say, now Rashi clarifies this. So we'll say, here it is. Let's play this out. Right? Reuven has an ox. Reuven's ox damages, and by the way, it doesn't have to be an ox, it's any case of damages, but let's just keep it according with the Gemara. Reuven's ox wanders into Shimon's field, eats a row of produce. And we'll say, let's say for our purposes right now, we know exactly which row it ate. It turns out, it's $1,000 in crops. So what does Bezin say to Reuven? What does the Bezin say to Reuven? $1,000. Reuven says, I'm cash poor. Okay, so now in order to satisfy this, we're going to have to go ahead and pay in property. So now watch this. So now we begin to look at their estates. So the Gemara says, V'amra ein li ma'os laparo, yitol karka v'demei ma'os nisko, u'balak bosa miziburis shalo v'itov. So now watch this. So now, what kind of land do you seize in satisfaction of this debt of damages? Rabbi Shmuel Silber, b'denizak shayminan. Rabbi Shmuel Silber said, listen to this. The way we assess damages is through the idis of the damaged party. Rabbi said, what this means is, we look at Shimon's portfolio. We say, Shimon, what's the best type of land you have? We look at that type of land, and that's the type of land that Reuven, the damager, is obligated to pay Shimon. Okay? So again, remember, what is everyone agreeing on? Everyone is agreeing that damages are paid through what? Or paid with what? Idis. The shaila is, whose idis are you valuating this by? Rabbi Shmuel says, and Rabbi Shmuel is an interesting chiddush, right? Rabbi Shmuel says, we look at the idis of the damaged party, and now Ruvain, that's what you're obligated to pay. That's what you're obligated to pay. In other words, that type of property, that sug of property, that's what you're obligated to do. Rabbi Kiva Savar, no. B'damazik shaymina. No, that's not true. In other words, we pay with the idis of the damaged party. Idis of damaged. Before we go on, what, right? I'm sorry, of the damager, I'm sorry. Let me start again. Rabbi Shmuel says, we pay with the idis of the damaged party. That's called b'denizak shayminon. Rabbi Akiva says we pay with the idis of the damager. Right? Ruvain, that's called b'damazik shayminon. Rabbi say, just before we go on, now you'll see where does this become intriguing. Where this becomes intriguing is the case we just mentioned. Rabbi say, imagine for just a moment, Ruvain's much wealthier than Shimon. So what happens? Ruvain's ziburis is the equivalent to Shimon's idis. So according to Rabbi Shmuel, all Reuven is going to have to pay is what? Essentially, from his own portfolio is going to be what? Ziburis, right? Because his ziburis is like Shimon's idis. According to Rabbi Akiva, Reuven is going to have to pay from his own idis. Just interesting. So watch this. So my time with Rabbi Shmuel. So I will say, I just want to point out this machlokes. This is very exciting. This is not really Gittin stuff, right? It's only here. Remember again, the only reason this is here is because we brought up the discussion about ksuva, that ksuva is paid from ziburis. So once we're talking about how ksuva is paid, we bring up Rabbi, but this is big Baba Kama stuff that we're going to talk about in Miras Hashem. In any event, the Gemara says as follows. My time Rabbi Shmuel. What's Rabbi Shmuel's logic? Ne'emra sada lamata, v'ne'emra sada lamala. It says sada in the beginning, right? Or at the beginning, they should say at the end of the pasuk, and sada at the beginning of the pasuk. Mas sada amur lamala, just like sada at the beginning of the pasuk, which talks about the field that was damaged. Din nizak. Af sada amur lamata, din nizak. Just like the sada at the beginning of the pasuk is talking about the sada of the damaged party, so too when it says meitav sadeu, that you pay back from idis, is talking about the idis of the damaged party, the nizak. Rabbi Kiva Savar, meitav sadeu yishalim. Rabbi Kiva says, no, just read the pasuk normally. Just be normal, Rabbi Kiva says. Right? It will say, so read the pasuk normally, meaning what the pasuk says, meitav sadeu yishalim. Pay from the best of your field. Who is it talking to? The guy who's paying, i.e. the mazik. And it means mazik, pay with the best of your field. So Rabbi say, this is the raging machlokes. Rabbi Shmuel, ahani gzer shava, ahani kra. Rabbi Shmuel says the gzer shava and the pasuk both help. Ahani gzer shava chada amran. So we'll say the gzer shava helps as we just said, because according to Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi say, just like again, the sada at the beginning of the field is the sada of the damaged party, so to the sada at the end of the field, which talks about payment, is talking about the sada of the damaged party as well. So what about the pasuk? Ahani kra di lesle lemazik idis viziburis. This is supposed to say di islay lemazik idis viziburis. That if the damaged, right, is a damager. Ruvain is the mazik, the damager. If the damager has idis and ziburis, so Rabbi say, right, he has best property, low grade property. Viziburis didei lo shavya ki idis denizak, and ultimately, again, Rabbi say, but let's say his ziburis is not like the idis of the nizak, the mishanli meitav. So Rabbi say, here's what I'll point out to you. What happens if, according to Rabbi Shmuel, what happens if, for argument's sake, right, Ruvain doesn't have property that is equivalent to Shimon's idis. Right? So this will be the reverse case. This will be the case where, let's say, Shimon is wealthier than Ruvain. So now, Ruvain doesn't have property that measures up to Shimon's idis. So what does he do in that case? What does he do in that case? He pays from the best of his property. In other words, he does the best that he can. Okay. Rabbi Akiva will say, so Rabbi say, so okay, let's pause over here, because this is actually very exciting. So Rabbi say, so here's what we have. We have a Mishnah that tells us, whenever you damage someone, again, and you don't have cash to pay back the damages, you pay from idis property. You pay from best property. Rabbi say, so now what's our machlokes? Machlokes Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Shmuel, who's idis? So Rabbi say, so now we know the case. The case is Ruvain damages Shimon. They go to Beis Din. Beis Din says, Reuven, you owe Shimon $5,000. Pay up. Right? Reuven says, I have no cash. No problem. Right? We'll take credit card as well. Right? No problem. Right? Otherwise, no problem. We'll just take property. Shabbos say, what type of property? It is. So now the shaila is, in accordance with whose valuation of idis do we assess these damages? Rabbi Shmuel will say, we look at the damaged party, right? What we call the nizik, Shimon. And we say, Shimon, okay, what's your best property? Let's go ahead. Let's see what $5,000 of your idis looks like. And now, Reuven, that's what you're obligated to pay. That's what you're obligated to pay, right? Rabbi Akiva says, no. We look at Reuven's portfolio. We say, Reuven, what does $5,000 of your idis look like? And that's what she'll pay with. That's the machlokas. So says the Gemara. Rabbi Akiva. So the Gemara says as follows. So remember again, Rabbi Akiva said back to the beginning of the Gemara. Rabbi Akiva said, "Lo ba'akos alagbos l'nizakim mina idis kavachomer lahekdish." Rabbi Akiva said, when paying from damages, you have to pay for damages from idis, and it's a kavachomer from hekdish. Gemara says, what's kavachomer lahekdish? My kavachomer lahekdish. Ilema. Listen to this. Dinakhe Torah didan Torah the hekdish. They both say this is incredible. If we're talking about a case where my ox, right, or called Reuven's ox gored an ox of hekdish, they both say, listen to this. We'll say, what is the liability if your ox gores an ox of hekdish? Interestingly enough, zero liability. Why? Shore'eu amrachmana below shor shel hekdish. They both say there is only liability for goring another Jew's ox. There is no liability for goring hekdish ox. Interesting. Right, because the Torah phrases it as shore'ehu. If your ox gores the ox of your fellow, which means that it has to be another yid, not of hekdish. Interestingly enough, Ela la'omer harei alai mana lebadek habayis. Maybe the case is like this. Let's say Reuven says, I hereby take upon myself to give a mana. Mana is an amount of money, $1,000 to bedek habayis. The asi gizbar b'shakal mi'idis. We'll say ultimately what happens in that case. The gizbar, who is the temple treasurer, he comes and he collects it from idis, from the best of your property. Lo yehei ela balchov. One second, why is that so? We'll say, if I pledge $1,000 to Beis HaMikdash, so what am I? I'm a debtor. Beis HaMikdash is my creditor. We'll say, what did the Mishnah say? What are debts collected from? Beinonis. Lo yehei ela balchov, u'balchov tina bebeinonis. V'chi tema kasav Rabbi Akiva balchov shakal be'idis. Maybe Rabbi Akiva holds that a creditor, right, is able to collect from idis, kini zakin, just like damages. Ikal mifrak, you could ask a pircha, malabalchov shekin yafa kocho benezikin. I will say balchov is different, right? Because stama balchov ultimately again has powers when it comes to damages. With damages, he's able to collect from idis. Tamar behekdish shahora kocho bezikin. I will say benizakin. Remember again, hekdish has lesser rights when it comes to damages. Why? As we just said before, what happens if you damage a shar of hekdish? What happens? Nothing. You're free from liability. The olam. So what's the case? So we'll say we're just trying to figure out. Rabbi Akiva made a statement, and his statement was: you always collect for damages from idis, kal v'chomer from hekdish. We just don't know what the kal v'chomer from hekdish is. So the Gemara says like this: the olam dinakhe Torah didon the Torah de hekdish. Watch this. It was very exciting. We'll say, so rather, what happened? My ox damaged the ox of hekdish, and now what happened? Rabbi Akiva savar like Rabbi Shimon Menasya, and Rabbi Akiva is like Rabbi Shimon Menasya. Oh, what's Rabbi Shimon Menasya? Say this Sanya. Here we go. Rabbi Shimon Menasya Omer shor shel hekdish shenagach l'shor shel hadyot pater. So let's listen to this. If a shor of hekdish goes ahead and gores a shor of another yid, it will say, what's the halacha? Pater. Why? Well, it's like diplomatic immunity, right? Hekdish is not liable. On the other hand, v'shal hekdish shenagach l'shor shel hekdish. I'll say, but but again, if my ox gores the ox of hekdish, bein tam, bein muad, mishalik nezek shalim. Wow. I will say, but if my ox gores an ox of hekdish, whether my ox is a first-time offender or a habitual offender, what's the halacha? Complete damages. So I will say, maybe Rabbi Akiva holds like this. So maybe what Rabbi Akiva is saying is halacha l'maisa. Whenever you, so I will say, if hekdish damages you, zero liability. If you damage hekdish, then what? Complete liability. That's fine. I will say, so that works fine. But my debe idis, right? Denizak kiziburis. I'm sorry. Mimai. So I will say, so ultimately, again, if that's the case, how do you know that we're setting this up, as we said before, as a case where the idis of the nizak is like the ziburas of the mazik? That's what we said in the beginning of an aleph. Dilma, the kuli alma b'denizak shaiminan. I will say, maybe everyone agrees, in fact, that we always go ahead and evaluate for damages. We always evaluate idis in accordance with the damaged party. V'hacha beplugta to Rabbi Shimon ben Menashe v'Rabbanan kamiflagi. And maybe over here there's just simul machlokes, Rabbi Shimon ben Menashe and the Rabbanan. That what we'll say, remember again, what's the machlokes? The machlokes is what happens if you damage hektish. The Rabbanan will say, if you damage hektish, Rabbi will say, what's your liability? What's your liability? 0. Rabbi Shimon ben Menashe says, what's your liability when you damage hektish? 100%. Rabbi Akiva suffered like Rabbi Shimon ben Menashe. Rabbi Akiva is like Rabbi Shimon ben Menashe. Rabbi Shmuel suffered like Rabbanan. And Rabbi Shmuel holds that ultimately, again, like the Rabbanan. Therefore, again, whenever you damage hektish, there's nothing due to hektish. Im kain my lo bahakasav. If that's the case, why do you need that phrase lo bahakasav? Va'od my kavachomer lehektish. What's the kavachomer? Va'od hamar avashi. I will say amud beis hamar avashi. Tanya behedja. We learned explicitly meitav sadeu umeitav karmel yishalim. When the pasuk says by damages that you pay of the best of your field and the best of your vineyard. So I will say, what do we say? So meitav sadeu shel nizak. Umeitav karmo shel nizak div Rabbi Shmuel. Right? Rabbi Shmuel holds that it's the best property of the damaged party. Rabbi Akiva omer meitav sadeo shel mazik umeitav karmo shel mazik. So I will say, so once again, it repeats the positions of Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel. So therefore, I will say, again, we're still not clear from Rabbi Akiva's perspective what that kal v'chomer of hektish was. So if I will say, so I will say, let's pause over here. So remember again, stop here for just a second. So I will say, so remember, what are we trying to do? What are we trying to do? You're like, that is an excellent question, right? Well, I've actually been wondering the same thing for the last 30 minutes. So I will say, so remember again, I'll tell you, here's what we're trying to do. We'll say, it's a good muster in life. Sometimes even if you don't know what it is that you're trying to accomplish, you just have to keep on trying to accomplish. Sometimes, again, the goal in life is just move. I don't know where I'm going, I don't know what I'm doing, but just keep moving forward, because something amazing happens. That sometimes if you just keep moving yourself forward, at a certain point in time, you will have clarity what you are moving towards and why you are moving towards it. Here's your moment of clarity. So I will say, so again, the Mishnah says, right? The Mishnah says a statement. Nizakin shamin lahen be'idis. When you damage someone, you pay an idis. Now, the Mishnah said why? Mipnei tikun ha'olam. For the benefit of society. The benefit of society. The Gemara says, benefit of society, it's a pasuk. Right? It's a pasuk. What does the pasuk say? So we'll say, just so you understand, the pasuk that we're talking about over here is Ki yaver ish sada. It's Shmos Chaf Beis Dalid. Ki yaver ish sada okeren v'shilach es birov ubir b'steacher. We'll say again, my animal goes and damages in another property. Meitav sadeu umeitav karmo yishamim. You repay the best idis, right? From the best of your property, from the best of your field, from the best of your vineyard. So I will say, the Gemara says. I will say now, whenever we see a phrase, we always assume, what does tikkun ha'olam mean? What does it mean? Rabbanan. Right? That's always how we see it, Rabbanan. So the Gemara says, you pay nizakin from idis, Rabbanan, it's a doraisa. The Gemara says, you're right. So what does it mean it's a tikkun ha'olam, I will say? Ultimately, again, I will say, really, what it means is like this. It's reflecting the view of Rabbi Shmuel. Watch this. Rabbi Shmuel says, the midda oraisa, when you pay of idis, whose idis are you paying of? Rabbi Shmuel, whose idis? The niza, the damaged party. Okay, pause. Hit the pause button over here. There's a raging machlokes. What's the raging machlokes? Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel. Ruvain damages Shimon. $5,000 worth of damage. Ruvain has no cash on hand. What does Beis Din do? Beis says, Ruvain, you're going to pay Shimon with property. What kind of property? Idis property. That's the Doraisa. Now, Rabbi say machlokes, Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Akiva. Whose idis do you evaluate based on? Rabbi Akiva says the damager. Ruvain. We look at Ruvain's portfolio. Ruvain, you pay Shimon $5,000 of your idis. Rabbi Shmuel says, no, we pay the idis ultimately again of the damaged parties, Shimon's property. Now both say, you say to yourself, that sounds so counterintuitive, Rabbi Shmuel. Why do you say that? Where does Rabbi Shmuel get this from? Gezerah Shava. Says Sadeh twice in the pasuk. Just like the first Sadeh is referring to the Sadeh of the damaged party, so to the second Sadeh, Meitav said that when we are paying with Idis, that also refers to the Sadeh of the damaged party. Okay, now that's the machlokes. So now we hit the play button. So Rabbi says, so now comes the Gemara and says, our Mishnah is reflective of the Viv Rabbi Shmuel. And in reality, midda oraisa, you should really go ahead and pay Idis from the damaged party's Idis, based on the valuation of the damaged party's Idis. But mipnei tikuna olam, we say, pay Idis from the damager's Idis. That's the tikuna olam. So we'll say, so the da'oraisa is, again, Mishnah reflects the view of Rabbi Shmuel, the da'oraisa is, pay from Idis pay from Idis b'denizak, from the dam, based on, I'll say, again, I want to be clear, when we say, I know you know this, I'm just going to say it, when we say that you pay from the Idis of the damaged party, of course, remember again, the damaged party is not paying something, but rather again, we assess the debt, we look at the Idis property of the nizak of the damaged party, we look at what $5,000 of that Idis property looks like, and then we say to the damager, that's what you owe. That's what you owe. You see what that property looks like? That's what you owe. So that's the doraisa. Rabbi Shmuel says, but midrabanan mipnei tikuna olam, we switch it, and we tell the damager, you have to pay $5,000 based on your Idis. Now, what's why we flip it, we don't know yet. That we don't know yet. Fine, I'll tell you. Fine, I'll tell you. No, I'm not going to tell you. Let's say, I'll tell you. Let's say, so very clearly, really what it comes down to is Rabbi Shmuel wants to disincentivize people damaging. So what he feels is, if a guy knows that he's going to lose $5,000 of his own Idis property, that causes a person to be more vigilant with damaging another. If I know that it's going to hit me in the best of my property, so that incentivizes a heightened, what's the word? Vigilance. A heightened vigilance or caution about damaging other people. That's the tikkun olam. So we'll say that's it. That's the last half hour and 5 minutes, right? That's it. So that's our first interpretation of the Mishnah. Now, here we go. We'll say Memtesama base 49b, 4 lines down. Ravina Amar, no. So we'll say now a second interpretation of the Mishnah. Ravina says no. Masnisin Rabbi Akivahi. Ooh, okay. So we'll say, so now this is really interesting, because so now we're going to see two different interpretations in accordance with both opinions of this raging machlokes. So Ravina says, really our Mishnah reflects the view of Rabbi Akiva. Both say, what does Rabbi Akiva say? Come on. What does Rabbi Akiva say? I said, you have to know this as well. I was going to say as well as your kid's birthday, but I realized that might not be such a good thing, right? Or maybe not such a good example for some. I'll say, right? So Rabbi Akiva holds b'damazik shamina, right? Rabbi Akiva holds that ultimately, again, we assess damages in accordance with the damager, with Ruvain. So really, Mishnah Haziv Rabbi Akiva, Damar Midaraisa b'damazik shamina. I will say, really, Rabbi Akiva holds that halacha l'maisa. Again, remember, I will say, what does everyone agree with? Just because, what does everybody agree with? Idis, right? So that's great. Everybody agrees with that. So really our Mishnah reflects the view of Rabbi Akiva, who holds that we evaluate damages based on the Idis of the damager. The damager, Ruvain we'll call him. So we'll say, so what's going on here? Rabbi Shimon, he did darish time of dikra. And ultimately, again, really the Mishnah is reflective of Rabbi Shimon. It was very interesting. Rabbi Shimon darishes time of dikra. And I will say, now this is a general idea. There's a concept ultimately again of darshinan time dikra or in darshinan time dikra. I will say, do we darshan the reasoning behind mitzvahs or not? Rabbi Shimon is of the opinion of darshinan time dikra. We go ahead and we extrapolate the reasoning from mitzvahs. Now watch this. Umat ham kamar. What the Mishnah, it will say, so when the Mishnah says mipnei tikun ha'olam, it's not a drabanan. Rather, it's interpreting the reason for the halacha. Matam hanizakin shalom be'idis. What is the reason ultimately, again, we go ahead and, when you damage someone, you pay ultimately again with idis, mipnei tikun ha'olam, for the benefit of society. For the benefit of society. I will say, look at Rashi, Adam Lama Ani Gozel. I will say, so I will say, according to Rabbi Akiva, this is incredible. According to Rabbi Shmuel, Mipnei Tikuna Olam means the oraisa the halacha is one way. Midrabanan, we've reformulated it for the benefit of society. According to Rabbi Akiva, the halacha is you always pay with idis, and it's the idis of the damager of Ruvain, right? The mazik. Why? Mipnei Tikuna Olam. Now, according to Rabbi Akiva, the way you read that phrase is, and why did the Torah structure it that way? That you pay from the idis of the damager, because this is beneficial for society. Why is it beneficial for society? Why does the Torah? Because it will say, when a person knows that when they damage, it's going to hit them in their idis, right? It's going to hit them in their idis, then Rabbi said, then ultimately again, it makes them think twice. So according to Rabbi Akiva, it's incredible, Bifnei Tikuna Olam ultimately is not a rabbinic interpretation of biblical law, but Bifnei Tikuna Olam is actually the interpretation of the biblical law. Incredible. This Sanya, we'll say, here we go. This is a great brisa. This Sanya. I'm Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon says, why is it that ultimately the Torah said that you pay for damages in idis, mipnei hagazlonin, or mipnei hachamsonin? So we'll say because of thieves. We'll say chamson. A chamson is like an extortionist. Kidei shiyomer adam lama ani gozel. Crime doesn't pay, right? Why should I steal? Why should I extort? What's going to happen? Lamachar bezdin yardel nechasai v'notlin saden noeshali. This girl will say, what's going to happen? So today I'm going to steal. It's going to be all great, and then tomorrow Bezdin is going to come, and what's going to happen? They're going to take my best assets. So if a person knows that as a result of crime, their best assets are going to be seized, it totally disincentivizes crime. And they will rely on the pasuk that says, Meitav Sadeo Meitav Karma Yishalim, that when collecting for damages, you collect of the best property. Lefichach Amru Hanizakin Shaman Lahen Be'idis. So Rabbi said, this is incredible. So Rabbi said, I just want to point out what's happening over here. So this is Ravina's interpretation of the Mishnah. So Ravina understands that no, our Mishnah that says Hanizakin Shaman Be'idis reflects the view of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva holds that ultimately we collect from the idis of the mazik of the damager, and it reflects the view of Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon darshans time of dikra. He darshans the reasoning for the psukim. And when the Mishnah says, why do we collect from idis? That's an interpretation of the biblical law. Torah structures it this way for the benefit of society. Because if a person knows that when they go ahead and steal from someone else, damage someone else, Beis Din is going to come and seize their best property, ultimately it disincentivizes crime, causes a heightened sense of vigilance and caution. Incredible. So now the Brisa goes on. So we'll say ultimately again, why does a creditor only have to pay back in Beinonis, middle grade property? Kidei shelo yira adam lechavero sadena v'dira noah v'yomer ekpots ve'alvanu kidei shegvenu b'chovi lefichach amru ba'cho b'beinos. So we'll say this is incredible. So we'll say, so ultimately again, why does a creditor only get to collect from Beinonis? So we'll say this is consumer protection, right? This is ultimately debtor protection. Because Rabbi say, what happens? A guy could say, right, Ruvain has a lot of money, and Ruvain sees a piece of property that Shimon has that Ruvain really likes. Ruvain has a great chap. I'm going to lend Shimon an exorbitant amount of money, right? Interest free. Why not? And I know Shimon can't pay it back, right? So I say, so what am I going to do? So this way, he's going to default on the loan, and I'm going to get to collect that piece of property that I really like. So in order to prevent that from occurring, we cap collection of a Baal Chov at Beinonis. I says, if that's the case, Al Mi'ata, Yehe B'Ziburis. So if that's the case, we'll say, make it even better. Say that a Baal Chov could only collect from Ziburis, inferior property. If that's the case, Imkain, Ata Noel Delis Bifnei Lavin. We'll say, here's the problem. If you do that, then no one's going to want to lend money. Remember, again, we'll say, as it is, lending money to a Jew already is not a very advantageous proposition because you cannot, it's very advantageous because it's a mitzvah, right? But it's not necessarily financially advantageous because you can't charge interest. If you know that all you could collect upon default is ziburis, what's going to happen? No one's going to want to lend money. Incredible. Ksuvas isha b'ziburis, divrei Rabbi Yehuda. So what about a ksuva? By the way, this is all part of the same brisa. It's a great brisa. Ksuva sisha, ksuva, ultimately again is paid in ziburis, which is inferior property. Then Rabbi Huda. Rabbi Meir Omer B'Meimah. So Rabbi Meir says, middle grade property. Rabbi Shimon, Mipnei ma omru ksuva sisha b'ziburis. Why do we say that the ksuva of an isha is paid in ziburis? Why? Well, it's incredible. She yosem imasha ish rotza lisa, ha-isha rotza linasei. This is very interesting. So apparently, you don't have to incentivize marriage for a woman, right? More than a woman wants to get married. More than a man wants to get married, a woman wants to get married. So I will say, you need a ksuva, but siburis is more than enough. I will say, which again, essentially what it's saying is all a woman needs is a sense of financial security. So as long as that financial security is guaranteed in some way, even if it's ziburis, right? The fact that it's ziburis and not beinonis or idis is not going to disincentivize marriage for her. Incredible. Another possibility is isha yosel irtzona v'shol irtzona. I will say a woman can be divorced with her will or against her will. Va'ish eino motzia ela lirtzono. But a man only divorces a woman through his will. So I will say, what does that have to do with anything? My davar I will say, what does that have to do with this discussion? So I will say, the Gemara says, you're right, it has nothing to do with this discussion. It's a side point, but listen to this. I will say the same way that when a man divorces his wife, so maybe halacha l'maisa, same way when a man divorces his wife, he has to pay her a ksuva, right? So takinu le'rabbanan ksuva minei, ki nafka ihi nama litakne le'rabbanan ksuva mina. Maybe when the woman is the one who forces the divorce, right? I will say, how does she force a divorce? She's a miserable human being, right? So I will say, so she's a miserable human being, and he can no longer go ahead and remain married to her. So l'maiseh, and maybe she should have to pay him a ksuva. Interesting idea, right? Right? I'm all for equality, right? So it says maybe he should have to go ahead and pay her a ksuba. To which the Gemara says, Tashma isha yotze lirtzona v'shol lirtzona ba'ish eina motze el lirtzono. So I will say no, because at the end of the day, even if she's miserable and the husband cannot live with her, l'maisa, the decision to divorce or not to divorce is his and his alone. Afshar demashi lebegita. Ultimately, again, he could go ahead and delay the get, and in an effort to go ahead and try to reconcile, try to help things get back on the rails. So because a get only happens if he wants it, and there's no such thing essentially as a coerced get, therefore there is no such thing as a reciprocal ksuba. Again, I will say that last point was really just a side point, but I will say what comes out is really something absolutely amazing. So what comes out over here is really two dramatically different interpretations of the Mishnah. Right? So we have the first interpretation of the Mishnah, we'll say ultimately again, which is that the Mishnah reflects the view of Rabbi Shmuel. Right? Rabbi Shmuel holds b'denizak shaminon. Right? So again, remember, we're just talking about the first line of the Mishnah. Right? Ha'anizakin shaman lahen be'idis. Right? You repay damages with idis. So we'll say, so first interpretation reflects the view of Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel holds that mid'oraisa. How do you pay? B'denizak, in accordance with the idis of the damaged party, right? Saloch alamaisa, but mivnei tikuna olam, in order to disincentivize damages, we flip it, and ultimately, again, we make it with the idis of the damager, right? The mazik. Second interpretation, ultimately, of the Mishnah, Ravina's interpretation, the Mishnah reflects the view of Rabbi Akiva, namely, b'damazik shaminon, we pay with the idis of the damager. What does mipnei tikun olam mean? Mipnei tikun is in accordance with Rabbi Shimon, who darshins time of the Kra, and mipnei tikun is not drabanan. Mipnei tikun olam is what? Is an interpretation of the Doraisa. Why do we go ahead and make you pay idis with the property of the damager? Ultimately, for the benefit of society. Once again, this disincentivizes damage, causes people to be more vigilant. And I will say the underlying machlokis over here is the machlokis Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva. Ultimately, again, everyone is agreeing that we're going to pay idis. The machlokis is it b'damazik sheminon? Is it the idis of the damager? Or is it the idis of the damaged party? That's the machlokis. We'll see the Rambam tomorrow. We'll say about how we pass it over here. Let's just go by to just for a few more moments. Ksuvas isha b'ziburis. You pay ksuba of a. So we'll say first thing in the Mishnah said ksuba is paid out with ziburis. Says Amar Zot Rabbi Rav Nachman Lor Amar Elam Yasmin. That's only true if you're paying the ksuba from the Yisomim. Or if the ksuba is being paid out from the estate of the Yisum, aval minei didei bebeinonis. But ultimately, if it's the husband paying out the ksuba, ultimately, again, he pays the ksuba from beinonis. So both say, so this is statement of Mar Zutra. So Mar Zutra says, the payment of the ksuba, or the type of property with which the ksuba is being paid with, depends on who is paying it. If it's the Yisumim who are paying it, then ultimately, again, ziburis. Right? If it's the husband or the ex-husband who's paying it, then beinonis. Says the Gemara, let's analyze this. Miyasmi, ma'ir ksuvasisha. Now, if we're talking about a case of Yisomim, then I will say, why do you have to single out ksuva? Afilu kol milinami. I will say, anything that is paid by Yisomim is always paid with ziburis. The Hatana we learned, you only pay, I will say, whatever debt is paid from the Yisomim, I will say, is only paid with ziburis. Elalav minei. So it must be that even when collecting from the husband himself, it is only paid with ziburis. To which the Gemara says, no. The olam miyasmi. No, really, it's from the Yisomim. Uksuvas isha itzrichalei. But I need to teach him about ksuva. Why? Sad chadai tanina mishum china kilo barabanon v'gaba. We'll say I'm going to thought Rabbi say mishum china. Now we'll say mishum china means that at the end of the day, we want to incentivize marriage for women. We'll say there's like this tension. In other words, do you need to incentivize marriage for women? Not incentivize marriage for women. So I will say, so that ultimately I see machlokes. But I might have thought that in order to incentivize marriage for a woman should always be able to collect from beinonis. Right? Whether she's collecting from her ex-husband or from the estate of her deceased husband, she should be able to collect from beinonis. Kamash malon, no. Kamash malon, again, whenever you are collecting from Yisomim, you're only collecting from ziburis. Amar Rava Tashma, Remeir Omer, Ksuvas Isha bebeinonis. Ksuva of an Isha is from beinonis. So I will say, Miman, who is she collecting from? Ilema miyasmi, if she's collecting from the Yisomim, lest they Rabbi Meir, hadisnan, in from minichse Yisom, elamina ziburis. Again, I will say, it can't be from the Yisomim, because we've already established, whatever debt is collected from the Yisomim is always collected from what? Always collected from ziburis. Elalav minei. Rather, must be from the husband. Must see that when she collects her ksuba from her ex-husband, ultimately, again, that is collected from beinonis. Mechlad Rabbanan Savis Ziburis. Let's say the Rabbanan hold that as Ziburis. Lo the Olam Miyasmi. Rather, once again, Abba say it was from the Yisomim. V'shayni ksuvas isha mishum china. And Abba say maybe ksuva is different. In other words, maybe there is a distinction over here because maybe halacha l'maisa. What we're in fact saying is that although generally when you collect from the estate of Yisomim, when you collect, generally it is from Ziburis. Maybe the exception to that rule ultimately is going to be ksuva, that a ksuva gets collected from beinonis, whether she's collecting from Yisomim or whether she's collecting ultimately again from the husband's Sarabosai. So again, I just want to point out over here, just so you understand, the tension over here is the Rabbanan in the Mishnah say that ksuva collects from Ziburis. Rabbi Meir says ksuva even gets from beinonis. So what we're just trying to figure out is, who is she collecting from? So in other words, is this ziburis across the board? That ksuva, whether she's collecting from a husband or from the estate, it's always, or maybe we're saying is like this. Maybe halacha l'maisa, ziburis means when she's collecting from Yisomim. But maybe when she's collecting from the husband, maybe then what? Maybe in fact that's better. So we'll stop over here for today. We're going to pick up Amirat Hashem with the rest of this discussion, the resolution of Amirat Hashem tomorrow. We'll say, Shkoyach. What a daf. Shkoyach, everyone. All right, Chevra Zoom, have a great day, everyone. Good morning, Jack. How are you?
The bottom line, if I understand it, is Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel are not really arguing at the end, because they both agree that you're going to pay the same.